I knew my neighborhood had an HOA, but I didn't realize it came with its own self-appointed dictator, Karen. Clipboard in hand, she patrolled the streets like a parking lot attendant on a power trip, handing out violations for the pettiest reasons. My crime? Parking legally in front of my own house. But Karen didn't just enforce the rules, she made them up. And when she tried to fine me for something that didn't even exist, I decided enough was enough. What Karen didn't know was that her own obsession with rules would be her downfall. Because in the end she didn't just lose her power, she got a fine of her own. And the best part? She had no one to blame but herself. It was a peaceful neighborhood, the kind where people mowed their lawns on Sundays, kids rode their bikes in the cul-de-sac, and everyone mostly kept to themselves. That is, until she arrived, Karen, the self-appointed ruler of the homeowners association. She didn't need an official title. She had a clipboard, an attitude bigger than her SUV, and an uncanny ability to find problems where none existed. The first time she introduced herself, it wasn't with a friendly wave or a basket of cookies. It was with a violation notice. Your garbage bins were on the curb 12 minutes past pickup time, she said, her arms crossed like she was laying down the law. I blinked, half expecting her to pull out a badge. Let's try to be more mindful, she added before strutting away. At first I thought it was just an overenthusiastic neighbor who took HOA rules a little too seriously. But soon it became clear. Karen wasn't just enforcing the rules, she was the rules. And she was about to make my life a lot more complicated. The first few weeks were manageable. Annoying but manageable. Karen patrolled the neighborhood like a self-proclaimed sheriff, clipboard in hand, eyes scanning for any perceived violations. She wasn't just enforcing HOA rules. She was making them up as she went. One morning I found a bright yellow notice stuck to my front door. Violation. Lawn not uniformly green. I stared at the paper, then at my lawn, then back at the paper. It was winter. Of course, the grass wasn't perfectly green. She got you too? Tom from next door muttered, sipping his coffee as he stepped outside. Last week she cited me for leaving my porch light on past midnight. It wasn't long before she escalated. One day she stood on the sidewalk, hands on her hips, staring at my mailbox like it had personally insulted her. I had no idea what she was looking for until she knocked on my door with her signature disapproving glare. Your mailbox is an inch too tall, she declared. I blinked. An inch. She nodded gravely. Regulations state that all mailboxes should be between 42 and 45 inches. Yours is 46. I stared at her, waiting for some indication that this was a joke. It wasn't. I should have known then. This wasn't about HOA rules. This was about control. And Karen was just getting started. At first I tried to be reasonable. Maybe she was just misinformed. Maybe if I calmly explained that some of these violations weren't actually violations, she'd back off. So when she knocked on my door one afternoon, this time holding a printed notice, I greeted her with my best forced smile. This is a warning, she announced, handing me the paper. Your car has been parked in the same spot for too long. HOA rules prohibit street parking for more than 72 hours. I glanced at my driveway. My car was parked neatly within the lines, just like it had been for the past 2 days. Karen, that's not an HOA rule, I said, keeping my voice even. She pursed her lips. It's an implied rule. I let out a slow breath. Implied by who? She didn't answer, just gave me a tight smile and walked away, leaving me holding a notice for a rule that didn't exist. I decided then, if she was going to make up nonsense violations, I might as well have a little fun with it. The next time she came by, she tried to lecture me about my house color. It's not in the approved HOA palette, she claimed. I raised an eyebrow. Really? Because I have the HOA approval right here. I pulled up the email on my phone, showing her the official confirmation. Karen stared at the screen, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. Well, it just doesn't look compliant, she muttered before storming off. That was my new strategy, fighting her with cold, hard facts. Every time she tried to fine me for something absurd, I came prepared with receipts. She didn't like that. Not one bit. And that's when she decided to turn things up a notch. Word spread fast in the neighborhood. Karen had found a new favorite target. People started sharing their own stories, some in whispers, others in exasperated rants over backyard fences. Last week she fined me for too many garden gnomes, Mrs. Patterson said, shaking her head. Since when is too many? Tom from next door leaned in. She accused my cat of trespassing. Everyone gasped. She wrote me up for having an unauthorized lawn chair. Another neighbor chimed in. Karen was on a full-fledged power trip and suddenly I wasn't the only one fighting back. Some neighbors encouraged me to stand up to her. Others, the ones who feared HOA retaliation, kept their heads down and just tried to stay out of her way. But the best reactions came from the ones who saw it all as pure entertainment. She's gonna implode one of these days, Tom smirked, watching Karen march down the street with her clipboard. It's only a matter of time. I started noticing little acts of resistance popping up. Someone replaced their perfectly legal mailbox with one that looked exactly like Karen's, just an inch taller. Another neighbor put out an obnoxiously bright doormat with the words "Hi Karen." But the real drama unfolded at the next HOA meeting. Karen arrived with a binder, thick, color-coded and dramatically labeled neighborhood offenders. She flipped through pages with an air of authority, ready to list out every alleged violation she had documented. She barely got through the first page before people started pushing back. That's not a rule, Karen. That's literally my driveway. You cannot find my cat. It was the first time I saw Karen falter. She wasn't used to people questioning her. But instead of backing down, she doubled down. Her voice got louder, her justifications more absurd. That's when I knew. Karen wasn't just going to stop. She was going to self-destruct. And I was more than happy to let her. Karen wasn't one to take resistance lightly. The more people pushed back, the more desperate she became to regain control. And when Karen felt cornered, she didn't retreat, she doubled down. One morning, I caught her in my front yard, measuring my grass with a ruler. Karen, what exactly are you doing? I asked, standing on my porch with a coffee in hand. She didn't even flinch. Grass cannot exceed 4 inches in height, she announced. Your lawn is 4.5. I took a long sip of coffee. Are you hearing yourself right now? She didn't answer. She just scribbled something on her notepad and stomped away. It was hilarious, but also getting out of hand. So I started collecting evidence. Every ridiculous violation notice, every fake rule she tried to enforce, every neighbor she harassed. It all went into a file. I recorded her tirades, took photos of her inspecting people's trash bins, and even saved copies of the absurd emails she sent to the HOA. And then the parking incident happened. One afternoon, I walked outside to find Karen standing next to my car, furiously snapping pictures. This vehicle has been parked here for too long, she declared, waving her clipboard like a gavel. I sighed. Karen, my car is legally parked. She smirked. I've already reported it. I wondered. The HOA police? Nope. Turns out Karen had gone above and beyond. She had called the actual city parking enforcement. I watched as she smugly waited for them to arrive, arms crossed, the ultimate enforcer. And then karma struck. The officer barely glanced at my car before turning to Karen. Ma'am, your vehicle is illegally parked in a fire lane. Karen's expression froze. What? She spluttered. No, that's not the issue. This car has been here too long. The officer shook his head. This vehicle is legally parked. But yours is in violation. And right then and there, in front of half the neighborhood, Karen was handed a parking ticket. The silence that followed was glorious. She tried to argue, but the officer was already walking away. Karen stood there, stunned, staring at the ticket in her hands like it was a personal betrayal. I couldn't help myself, I smiled. Well, rules are rules, Karen. She shot me a glare so intense it could have melted asphalt. And just like that, the queen of HOA violations had been officially fined. Karen's downfall wasn't just about the parking ticket. It was the final straw that unraveled her entire self-appointed reign over the neighborhood. Word spread fast. By the time the next HOA meeting rolled around, everyone had heard the story. Karen, the self-proclaimed enforcer of rules, had broken the very rules she so passionately upheld. The meeting was packed. Neighbors who had never attended before suddenly found themselves very interested in HOA affairs. Karen arrived looking defeated but still trying to salvage her reputation. She stood at the front, attempting to regain control, shuffling through her binder of violations as if that would restore her authority. But this time people weren't having it. You fined me for having 2 garden gnomes, but you parked in a fire lane? Mrs. Patterson scoffed. Tom leaned back in his chair, smirking. So, Karen, do you plan on paying your fine promptly? Or are we implying that doesn't apply to you? Laughter rippled through the room. Even the HOA board members who usually sat stone-faced were struggling to keep straight faces. Then the moment everyone had been waiting for. One of the HOA board members cleared their throat. Given the numerous complaints against your conduct and your recent violation, we've decided to officially remove you from your position. Karen's eyes widened. You can't do that. We just did. And just like that, Karen was out. The room erupted in murmurs. Some relieved, some outright cheering. Karen stood there, stunned, her precious binder clutched in her hands, as if holding onto it would somehow change the outcome. She stormed out, muttering about how ungrateful everyone was, but nobody tried to stop her. The second the door closed behind her, someone, probably Tom, started a slow clap. And just like that, the reign of HOA Karen was over. With Karen gone, the neighborhood felt lighter. It was as if an invisible weight had been lifted. The air smelled fresher, the birds chirped louder, and for the first time in months, people actually enjoyed stepping outside without the fear of being fined for existing. Lawn gnomes started appearing in yards again. More than 2 just for the fun of it. Porch lights stayed on as long as people pleased. Someone even put up a reserved parking for Karen sign in the fire lane where she had gotten her infamous ticket. And the best part? The HOA meetings, once a battleground of nitpicking and nonsense, actually became productive. Without Karen's constant complaints, the meetings were half as long and twice as useful. As for Karen, well, after her dramatic exit, she kept a low profile. Some say she sulked inside for days. Others claim she tried to rally support for a Karen comeback campaign, but by then no one was interested in her rulebook dictatorship. Then one day a moving truck showed up in front of her house. No one knew exactly where she went, but rumor had it she moved to another HOA neighborhood a few towns over. One even stricter than ours. Fitting. With Karen gone, life went back to normal. The grass grew freely, the mailboxes stood proudly, and for the first time in a long time, everyone could just exist without fear of clipboard judgment. And as I watched my neighbors put up twinkling non-HOA approved holiday lights that evening, I raised my coffee cup in silent tribute to Karen. May her clipboard rest in peace. Have you ever dealt with an HOA Karen in your neighborhood? What's the most ridiculous rule you've encountered? What's the pettiest thing someone has ever complained about in your community? If you were in my shoes, how would you have handled Karen? Would you fight back or ignore her? What's your favorite moment of Karen's downfall? The parking ticket, the HOA meeting, or something else? Do you think HOAs are helpful or just a power trip for certain people? What's the most absurd HOA rule you've ever heard of? What's your opinion on lawn gnomes? Are they a neighborhood menace or an innocent decoration? Do you think Karen learned her lesson, or is she terrorizing a new neighborhood right now? Have you ever been fined for something completely ridiculous? What was it? If you had to write an HOA rule just to mess with Karen, what would it be? If you enjoyed watching Karen's downfall as much as I did, don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And if you want more wild HOA drama, entitled people stories, and satisfying karma moments, subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new video. Trust me, there's always another Karen out there causing havoc and you won't want to miss it. You can also add a playful touch. Oh, and if you don't like and subscribe, Karen might just show up at your door with a clipboard. Just saying, smirking face.